In this video, we explain the most common actions, what they do, and why we have them. Then we'll demo them in AWI. This is the list of actions that you'll see over and over. In this video, we focus on the first 5, namely cancel, restart, deactivate, and the recursive and forced options. These are the most basic actions in the system. Cancel applies to running processes like jobs, file transfers, events, and workflows with the active status. When you cancel a task with a green status, it turns red and takes the canceled status. In our example, we have a workflow with 3 child tasks. The first has completed, the second is active, and the third has the waiting for predecessor status. The green box around the workflow indicates the status of the workflow task. When we cancel it, the second task is allowed to finish, while the third task takes a red canceled status. We also have the cancel recursive, which will cancel the workflow, as well as any active child tasks. We'll consider this scenario in a few moments. Deactivate sets an activated task to a deactivated status. What does that mean? Automic automation always keeps a historical record of all executions, but only tracks activated tasks and operations. When a task is deactivated, it's no longer live in the field of managed operations. In the context of production management, it no longer exists. Deactivate can only be applied to tasks with an ended status. An ended task is one whose status is settled and not in pre or mid execution. In other words, ended OK or abend, which is ended not OK. Generally speaking, as an operator, you shouldn't have to deactivate very often because process owners are taught to deactivate their tasks automatically using native design mechanisms. This is what our 3-task workflow shows. We have 2 ended OK tasks and 1 abend. When we deactivate the workflow, all 3 child tasks are deactivated and they're no longer on our radar because they've been removed from our field of vision. There is no action associated with a deactivated task. Note the deactivate forced option. If you can cancel a workflow without the recursive option, the workflow and any task waiting for predecessors take the abend status. If you try and deactivate the workflow task, the system is designed to deny this request because there's an active child task. But you can force the request. The workflow and all ended and abend tasks will be deactivated. The active task will continue on its own. Finally, restart restarts ended tasks. Our workflow has 2 ended and 1 abend task. We restart the workflow. The entire process restarts from the beginning by generating new tasks. There are a number of options. You can set a restart point, set a manual release, set a different queue, and set a number of test options which are usually dictated by the owner of the process. We briefly mentioned the recursive and forced options. The recursive option applies the action not only to the parent, but also recursively to the children tasks. In our example, we cancel a workflow. Any child task that is currently executed will not be canceled unless you apply the recursive option. Then the cancel action applies to all child tasks that have some sort of non-ended status, like the green active. The forced option applies the action to the workflow which has active tasks. A workflow with active child tasks cannot be deactivated. That goes against the basic premise of deactivation, which states that only ended tasks can be deactivated. But if you force it, you deactivate the parent and the ended child tasks. The active child task continues alone. Let's start by executing a workflow task several times. We'll use this to show the cancel action. Note that the execute action is available from the process assembly perspective, but not process monitoring. This is by design. We start with a simple workflow with 3 children in sequence. We execute and then display the monitor, which takes us to the process monitoring perspective. Our workflow task is executing. You can access associated actions either in the task lists or directly in the monitor with the Workflow Actions menu. We cancel the workflow task. We have not used the recursive option, so any child task with a waiting for predecessor status takes a canceled status, along with the overall workflow. The active task is allowed to continue. We have a filter in place so that only our workflow task shows up in the list. We close the filter menu and restart our workflow. These are the restart options. If they are needed, this information is normally provided and documented, including the test options. When we perform a restart, a new instance of the workflow task is created, but the old child tasks, including the two that were canceled with the cancel action and the first one that was allowed to complete, are still there. We do a cancel recursive, which will end the two tasks with the waiting for predecessor status, but also the active child. Note that preparing status, this is a short-lived intermediate status before start. The recursive cancels everything. We can deactivate this task. The task and all child tasks are removed from the perspective. Since we did not have active tasks, forcing the deactivate is not necessary. We have a new workflow. Let's execute it and show the deactivate action with the forced option. We can cancel the workflow task without the recursive option. The parents and the children with waiting for predecessor statuses take the abend status, but the first child is allowed to continue. Let's try and deactivate the parent task. The error message is clear. Deactivation is impossible while there are active tasks. All aborted tasks, parents and children, are deactivated. The active task continues on its own, uninterrupted.